This is Akashwani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Prime Minister's Mann Ki Baat program. The participants are K.V. Prasad, political analyst, and Gaurav Dhawanlal, anchor.
Hello and welcome to our program. We are delighted to have with us political analyst Mr. K.V. Prasad. And of course today, as we all know, Prime Minister Modi had his Mann Ki Baat broadcast. It was very interesting, and as usual, an array of topics were covered. Mr. Prasad, thank you so much for joining us on the program. The Prime Minister's mentioning of young people and saying that their role that they play in, of course, different areas, and he always picks up something about young people. And this time he spoke about how India's fight with tuberculosis, how TB-free India by 2025 is what we are looking at, and the role of young people. This definitely must be a huge energy boost for a lot of young people tuning in.
We all know it's a big challenge the country faces, as the objective is to have a TB-free India by 2025. That means 2 years down the line. And so it's in fact a huge challenge, because in terms of sheer numbers, if you look at the National TB report of 2023, I think the last year's notification of TB was something like 24 lakhs. So that means obviously there's so many. But one of the things that the government of India, through its various programs, in particular, it has started what is called as a Nikshay Mitra, which obviously is trying to galvanize people and make it a people-centric program, so that people at every level, right from the panchayat to up, adopt TB patients and then try and help them. And I think it was in this context that the Prime Minister did mention that many children have come forward to help patients with tuberculosis. Now that's a huge advantage, because as you grow, you're an impressionable age of mind. You are not only trying to inculcate the sense of social work and social assistance, but also awareness towards this scourge called tuberculosis. Tuberculosis, as you know, once upon a time was known to be a disease which, when somebody contracted, people own homes would kind of distance themselves for the fear of being contamination. I think that kind of contagious it was. But over the period of time, things have changed, and I think today the Prime Minister did mention, I think something like more than 10 lakh TB patients have been adopted, and almost 85,000 Mitras have working on this. That is a huge step in the direction. Obviously, everybody is working to one goal: eliminate TB by 2025.
And Mr. Prasad, I think the point that you mentioned about children, very, very vital. When policies and decisions percolate right down to the level, and when they say children take up a cause, because then it becomes a household conversation. It becomes, and the ripple effect of these conversations is huge. And I think that's where this whole policy and this whole movement of wanting to achieve a TB-free India by 2025 going to really gather momentum in the next couple of years. And we definitely will. Wanting to now move on to sports, and that's another area of young people. Good news has come in for India. So over the years, when you see our movement in sports, do you feel that somehow, and we always said we are such a populous country, but why don't we get enough medals? Over the last 10, 15 years, we've been seeing that definitely the percentage of medals coming in as of a total has really increased. Your views on this?
Country of so many millions not winning medals. I started my career as a sports journalist, and I remember many a time all of us looking at the same with lament as to why a country of this size and population. But what we realized, as somebody who's covered sports initially, is because we didn't have the kind of resources to train in most competitive environments, and we lagged sometimes what they known as the killer instinct, for sheer reason that we were not in a position to compete at the highest levels because of lack of competitive practice and competitive training. Over the years, with concerted efforts, especially if you look at the kind of various schemes that the government of India has been running, is to encourage sports federations to allow talented sports persons who come out of different tournaments that are being conducted to come and nurture them, give them funds, let them train themselves in the best academies of the world. And that actually creates a sense of a very rich pool of talented people who then compete with the best in the continent, best in the region, best in the world. We have increasingly increased our presence, not just in winning, it's also winning tournaments and sometimes winning medals. In fact, over this century, we have won medals in individual sports in Olympics and World Athletics and World Championships. That itself is speaking. And I think the Prime Minister did mention many other tournaments that India has won in the last 1 month itself. That shows the kind of effort that goes into it. And he in particular remarked on the Khelo India University Games. Now, we all know universities are nurseries. That's where you get the best of talent. People are available. Raw talent is converted into a fine diamond who then competes in the best.
We spoke about increased training and facilities of a talented pool, probably towards the final stage, or where they're doing zonals or they're doing national levels and then international levels. How about grassroots infrastructure development? We have seen a huge jump in that because that's where we actually find and discover talent.
That is something that has to be developed over a period of time. It has developed. I would always say we may not be happy because of the sheer numbers that we have. Obviously, it takes time to have sporting facility in almost every village. Let's put it that way. But even to have it in every district itself is a big achievement, and that has been the effort. And also the fact is, it's easy to create a facility, but difficult to keep encouraging children to come back and play because there are other issues that crop up. But yes, grassroots facilities are important, and the way the game is changing. Remember something we always talk about, it is only from a mass that you will get the cream. You need to have more people at the bottom end of the pyramid, and from there you distill and build them up to make them into champions.
Moving on to the Prime Minister's conversation, the theme of Yoga Day this year, and he said it is yoga for Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. One world, one family. This is a theme we've taken through G20 also. One world, one family, of being able to reach out. We've always seen that yoga went out to India and came back and suddenly became popular. But today, India as center radiating yoga, foregrounding it and bringing it to international levels, we've had a huge role to play in bringing it there.
Just mentioned the beginning of the program, I think Prime Minister's Mann Ki Baat, we all know, is usually held on the last Sunday of the month, but this time it advanced by a week simply because he's traveling overseas, which will take him to the United States and Egypt. In particular, in US, 21st of June, International Yoga Day, he will be at the United Nations headquarters, and we've seen the kind of response we've already been getting about the kind of excitement that Prime Minister Modi will himself lead the yoga enthusiasts in UN. Now, I will also quickly connect that to something that happened on June 8, 2016. That is the time when the Prime Minister made this a joint session of US Congress. There he mentioned about India's contribution to the world in the form of a yoga. And he said something, so many people, millions of people practice yoga in the world, but India does not claim intellectual property rights, which means India's contribution of yoga to the world is literally translates what you just mentioned, the Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, where we believe the world is one.
We talk of one world and one family, and when we look at yoga, I think the core of yoga is the more you make it your own, the more it becomes your own. And finally, it doesn't belong to any one country or any one place. It's yours and it's your mantra for life. And I think beautifully, as you said, is now being adopted. Of course, share credit is there, but then it is yours once you begin it. That's the power of this yoga.
That's right, and I think we will mark this year again by Prime Minister himself leading at the UN, which declared International Day of Yoga on June 21. So I think it's like coming to a full circle 8 years or 9 years down the line.
Mr. Prasad, we also know that India's close traditional connection to biodiversity. We've always believed that it's very important for us to be connected to the ground. As the Buddha said, the foot only becomes a foot when it feels the ground. And now we are talking of reviving our forests, and the Prime Minister also spoke about how the Neem River has started to flow again. Your comments?
Water conservation or environment is very close to his heart, because be it the Swachhta campaign he launched when he started his tenure as the Prime Minister, and as you carry on conservation, water conservation is something which we've been talking about for a long time, because in a country which is parched of water, especially some regions which have no natural sources, it is here he has said that let us say catch the rain has been a slogan. The whole idea is you're getting water for free from when the skies open up. But if you don't conserve that water, it flows into rivers and onto the sea, and it goes to waste. Instead of that, if you have check dams, if you kind of collect water in ponds, people can use it. And it's not that Indians are not used to it. We've read reports of ancient times and also in the medieval times when people used to conserve rainwater. Especially in, we all know areas, if you go in places like Rajasthan or other landlocked areas where you have problems. So I think this is something which is just telling people this is what we can do and this is what we have been doing. It's just revisiting that subject. I think that's important, and that's in that context I think he did mention a couple of instances, whether it is in a Bundelkhand area where Mr. Tulsiram Yadav's experiment, or as you mentioned, the Neem River, and so on and so forth.
That's
so I think
it's something very close to his heart. Absolutely. Mr. Prasad, wanting to draw your attention to another point mentioned by the Prime Minister, and I think that is the basis of all that is happening within this country, has happened ever since the British left and we got our own constitution, we got our own independence. Talking about democracy, India is the largest democracy in the world, and we have over the years managed to define, redefine, because it's an organic process. There is no one-size-fits-all democracies, and we are such a diverse nation. We are a nation of diversity in our demographics also. Young people entering the voting age. How do we see today the protection of this pillar on which our nation rests? Reference the Prime Minister's conversation.
Well, I think the Prime Minister did refer, as he says, India is the mother of democracy, and he mentioned the fact that our democratic ideals are paramount, consider Supreme Court as supreme, and minded the people of the country about what happened on June 25th, 1975. Now, that was the day when India had this very unfortunate, where internal emergency was imposed, and that was a period. People like us who are in the youth, we know the kind of situation we all went through. It was very difficult times. There were lots of people who were behind bars, people who wanted to talk about democratic rights, and other things were not denied the same. And many other things, of course, this has all been well documented. So I think this is something he just wanted to remind people that India had emerged stronger from that experience, mainly because many people put themselves in the front and work to ensure that the democratic rights and democratic things are restored and people enjoy the same level of freedom they once enjoyed in the pre-75 era. So between 1975 and 1977, when the emergency was lifted, we know since then the landscape of Indian polity itself underwent a change, and for the first time we had a government which was not formed by the Congress party. Everybody knows the first time we had a coalition government. So since then, the landscape itself has altered. And as you said, it's a democracy, it's a work in progress. Of course, there may be some times when we find ourselves in different corners and difficult turns. But the collective will of people shows the way out. And as you pointed out, with every year, lakhs of younger people joining the stream by making their voice heard through the vote, this spirit of democracy has to be strengthened and should be strengthened and will be strengthened, is the belief.
Absolutely. Well said indeed. Wanting to now move to disaster management, another thing that I think India has made a lot of progress in, not only disaster management but also mitigating the effects of a disaster, all that is left in its wake, with Cyclone Biparjoy and now currently a lot of news items on that. Mr. Modi also took this up. Your inputs, please.
Well, I think, Gora, it was but natural for the Prime Minister to talk about the cyclone Biparjoy, because that we all heard for days together, the kind of warning that the meteorological department was giving. So one, it shows two things that showed up, that the preparations to mitigate and ensure that the disaster cause had less effect on lives of people and cattle. That I think they were shifted to safer locations much before the landfall began. So thereby making sure that the impact had, of course, you could not stop the kind of on the properties and other roads and good poles and buildings and other things, but life, most precious life was saved. So that's very important. And I think it is where the National Disaster Response Force and the State Disaster Response Force and the state authorities must be complemented, which in fact the Prime Minister also. And with them is the resilience of the people. It is that important because the people stood up, be ready, we were ready for it, face the challenge, and it is a collective might, as the Prime Minister said, the collective might of the people of India, the collective power, which actually provided solution to the challenges that came up. So I think that shows a way up and a way forward.
Mr. K.V. Prasad, thank you so much for joining us for our program today and helping us put the spotlight on Prime Minister Modi's Mann Ki Baat address. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
You were listening to a discussion on Prime Minister's Mann Ki Baat program. The participants were K.V. Prasad, political analyst, and Gaurang Dhawanlal, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.